He stood in their kitchen like a stranger. Same posture, same cologne. But the weight in his eyes wasn't confusion. It was decision. You're not what I need anymore. That's what Vaughan Lattimore said. 7 years of marriage. Years of shared bank accounts, late-night ramen, whispered dreams. Years of small anniversaries and big sacrifices. And yet, those were the words that ended it. No yelling, no tears. Just a cold cup of iced coffee on the counter and a man who had already packed his bags. She wanted to ask, "When did I become too small for you?" But she didn't speak. She couldn't. Because deep down, Amira Belen already knew. He wasn't choosing a new life. He was choosing the version of himself that didn't include her. Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories, where we don't just tell stories. We tell the kind that stick with you long after the screen fades. If you've ever felt dismissed, left behind, or replaced, stay with us. Because this isn't just a breakup story. It's a rise story. So, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the ground up. Like the video. It helps others find this story too. Let's begin. It started 7 years earlier in Atlanta. Amira Belen was 25, a public school English teacher who knew how to stretch a paycheck and still show up looking polished. Her clothes were always tailored, even when thrifted. Her smile warm but reserved. She didn't chase trends. She didn't chase people. She taught by day, and at night, she stitched fabric. Her grandmother had passed down the habit, not as a hustle, but a form of healing. Thread by thread. Seam by seam. It reminded her she could still create something beautiful, even when life felt like it was unraveling. That's how she kept her peace. That's how she stayed grounded in a city chasing luxury cars, new construction condos, and followers like currency. Vaughan Lattimore didn't look like status when they met. He looked like struggle. At the time, he was an underdog tech developer trying to build a mobile app with little more than ambition and a cracked screen laptop. They met at a local entrepreneur meetup in Midtown, a free event serving stale coffee and lukewarm hope. She almost didn't go, but she did, and when Vaughan stood up to introduce himself saying, "I know it sounds ridiculous, but I believe this idea will change everything for small businesses," she didn't hear arrogance. She heard passion, and when everyone else rolled their eyes at his optimism, she asked him questions. Real ones. They talked until the library closed, then again the next day, and the next. Vaughan was awkward but brilliant, a man who didn't need a lot, just a chance. He grew up the middle of 3 brothers in a crowded one-story house in Macon. He'd always felt unseen, but with Amira, he didn't feel overlooked. He felt held. She believed in his ideas, even when others laughed. She loaned him her old iPad when his screen stopped responding. She edited his pitch decks and grilled him before investor calls, and when he didn't get funding for the 4th time, she sat beside him in silence, letting him be disappointed without shame. She wasn't impressed by what he could become. She was in love with who he already was. Their wedding was small, 28 guests. Her aunt made the lemon cake. His cousin played the saxophone. They honeymooned in Asheville, North Carolina, splitting a suite with another newlywed couple to afford the mountain view. But they were happy. Money didn't matter when there was mission. They built routines, her mornings filled with kids' essays, his nights with code and coffee. She ironed his shirts before his big meetings. He brought her dinner when she graded late. On weekends, they cleaned, prayed, and watched documentaries on founders they hoped to become. It was simple. And it worked, until the app took off. It was a slow build at first. One retailer in Charlotte, then a restaurant chain in Savannah, then a call from a New York investor with a deep voice and an even deeper wallet. Overnight, Vaughan became the guy with the solution. His inbox tripled. His suits changed. His voice shifted. The man who once told her, "I don't care about clout," now ended sentences with, "We need to think about optics." She noticed the change. He suggested she maybe go more neutral with her lipstick at the next tech conference. He corrected the way she said strategy. He stopped holding her hand in public. Then he skipped her cousin's baby shower to attend a yacht event sponsored by a financial firm Amira had never heard of. And just like that, the distance that started as logistics became emotional. They still slept beside each other, but it didn't feel like together. Then came Laria Kincaid, a marketing influencer with polished captions and 34,000 followers, known for her waist-length wig, luxury unboxings, and signature laugh. She showed up in Vaughn's event photos once, then twice, then in a tagged photo where she leaned in close, whispering something into his ear while he smiled. The blogs noticed, so did Amira. He denied it. "It's just branding," he said. "You're overthinking." But the trust had already thinned to a thread, and soon even that snapped. The final conversation wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no slamming of doors, just him, her, and an apartment that no longer felt like home. "I've changed," he said. "You've erased me," she replied softly. He didn't argue, didn't deny it. He just said, "You're not what I need anymore." That's how Amira lost her husband, not to a woman, but to an image. And that's how Vaughan lost everything that made him whole, for a seat at someone else's table. But what he didn't know was that the woman he left behind was about to build something no influencer could fake, no investor could buy, no title could replicate. She was about to become what money couldn't touch. The weekend Vaughan moved out, it rained in Atlanta. Not the romantic kind. Not a storm either. Just dull, steady rain. The kind that matched the silence in Amira's apartment. He left with a black duffel bag and his AirPods in, like she was background noise. He didn't even look back. She didn't cry until the door clicked shut. And even then, it was quiet. Not the loud sobs that fill a room, the kind that sit in the back of your throat and make. You press your hand to your chest like you're trying to keep your heart from slipping out. That night, she lay on the side of the bed that used to be his. Her eyes didn't close. Her chest didn't rise easy. It wasn't just the heartbreak. It was the humiliation. On Monday, she showed up at work wearing all black. A student asked her if someone died. She smiled and said, "Not exactly," but something had. Her hope, her rhythm, her sense of self. For years, she had built everything with Vaughan in mind. Saved money, turned down career moves, moved cities. She had believed in their future. But now she was just alone. The blogs didn't wait. By Tuesday, Laria had posted a photo at the edge of Vaughan's penthouse balcony with the caption, "When alignment meets timing." Her comment section was ruthless. "This is what he left his wife for. I get it. Amira who? Level up king." He upgraded respectfully. No one mentioned Amira's sacrifices. No one remembered the woman who paid the phone bill when he couldn't, or the one who edited his code before his first launch. She had been part of the build, not the brand, and brands are what people chase. The world applauded Laria, and Amira sat in a studio apartment, watching strangers rewrite her history like she had never existed. She returned to teaching, but something was missing. The joy she once felt for helping her students connect with a poem or finish an essay started to fade. Everything felt dull, predictable, contained. She stood at the front of the classroom, teaching Maya Angelou, but her mind wandered to the stitches she hadn't finished on the half-sewn dress back home. She'd stopped designing 3 years ago when Vaughan's business took off. "There's no time for that now," he'd said. "You can pick that up later." Later never came, until now. That weekend, she went up into the attic space above her grandmother. His closed shop, a small place that smelled like cedar and memory. She found her old sketch pads in a box marked "Next Time." Each page held pieces of who she used to be. Bold lines, deep folds, clean silhouettes. They weren't trendy. They weren't built for runway. But they were hers. She took the pages out, wiped off the dust, rolled her chair toward the table by the window, and just started drawing. It wasn't for business. It wasn't for revenge. It was just to remember what it felt like to make something beautiful again. Over the next few weeks, the sketches became patterns. The patterns became fabric, and the fabric became dresses. 1, then 2, Then a third that sat on the dress form, like it had been waiting to be born. She posted one picture online. A soft cream midi dress with a dramatic shoulder line and tapered waist. No face, just the back view. The caption read, "Made for the woman who's no longer trying to be enough for someone else." 12 likes. Then 37. Then 308 by the next day. She didn't expect the messages. "Where can I buy this? Do you take commissions? Do you ship to LA?" She wasn't ready for orders, but she was ready to try. She made 3 more dresses and posted each one with a message, not about fashion, but about becoming whole again. The 5th post read, "For women who were never expected to rebuild." She called her brand Sewn and Known. Sewn, because healing was a process that took time and thread. Known, because she no longer needed to be chosen to feel seen. She stayed up late sewing, woke up early teaching, ate whatever she could afford, but her spirit felt full again. It wasn't about proving Vaughn wrong. It was about finally becoming who she put on pause for him. Meanwhile, Vaughn wasn't looking back. He was doing interviews, showing up at black tie events, sitting on panels about scaling with integrity. His app had crossed 4 million downloads. His LinkedIn photo was updated every 3 months. And his new wife, always beside him, smiling with teeth, wearing outfits that were posted and tagged within an hour. From the outside, Vaughn Lattimore was the image of ascension. But image doesn't always mean peace, and Amira knew now. That's what he chased, image, not truth, not intimacy, not her. She declined every invitation to reunions, fundraisers, and events that once included +1 status, not out of anger, out of alignment. She wasn't afraid of being seen. She was simply too busy building something that didn't require being photographed to be validated. She kept the first dress she ever made after Vaughn left. Not to sell, not to wear, just to remind herself what came out of her when everyone else walked away. By the 1-year mark, she'd filled 15 sketchbooks. By the 2nd, she had created a small line for a local fashion showcase. By the 3rd, she was invited to speak on a women's entrepreneurship panel. No publicist, no manager, just consistency and heart. One night, while scrolling Instagram, she saw Vaughn's latest post, him, Laria, palm trees, private dinner. Caption, built different. She looked at it, then swiped past it. She didn't feel envy. She didn't feel loss. She felt free, because she'd finally realized Vaughn never left because she wasn't enough. He left because he didn't know what enough looked like in the first place. Vaughn Lattimore didn't know when the winning stopped feeling like a win. On paper, life was perfect. He had the penthouse in Buckhead, the corner office with a skyline view, the Forbes feature, and a wife who knew how to pose with a glass of champagne like it was second nature. Laria looked like the kind of woman magazines begged to feature. Her laugh was rehearsed, her presence intentional. They weren't in love. They were aligned, strategically. Their marriage was content. Photo shoots, brunches, vacations with coordinated outfits, and perfectly filtered captions. But the silence between them at night? That was never posted. Laria wasn't interested in long conversations. She was interested in followers. Everything was marketing. Her compliments came in rehearsed tones, her affection in doses timed for cameras. "You're on the cover of Tech Monthly," she said once, flipping the page. "Smile more in the next one." When he spoke about his latest investor meeting, she barely lifted her eyes from her phone. "I've heard this pitch, babe. Talk to your board. I have to schedule hair and glam." She called it glam, not makeup. And she never went anywhere without it. At first, Vaughn told himself this was what success looked like. He had outgrown the slow mornings, the handwritten notes, the late-night prayers with Amira when money was tight and hope was thinner. But now, something was missing. The noise in his head was louder than the applause outside. Every time he scrolled through his mentions, every time he refreshed the engagement, numbers on Laria's latest post, something in his chest stayed empty. He didn't feel seen. He felt performed. The turning point came one night during a private investor mixer in Los Angeles. Laria was posing near the glass wall, taking photos with two socialites. Vaughan was seated in a quiet corner, whiskey in hand, when a woman approached him. Not young, not flashy, wearing a wool coat, natural hair pinned back, no flashy jewelry. "I like your app," she said, "but I admire your ex-wife more." He blinked. "Excuse me? I'm on her wait list. Took me 4 months to get in. The pieces she makes, they're like armor. I wore one of her coats to my divorce hearing." She raised her glass, smiled, and walked off. That night, Vaughan stayed up searching. He hadn't looked Amira up since they split. Not once. Not even when mutuals tagged her in photos or mentioned her pop-up events. He had told himself it was better not to know. But now, he needed to. He typed in, "Sown" and "known." The homepage was quiet, clean, sharp, muted color tones. A quote across the top, "For women who were never expected to rebuild." He clicked through the photos, not models but real women, in soft, strong lines, in fabrics that felt like they carried stories. Then he saw it. Her. Amira. Not in a glam gown, not retouched, just her, standing outside a sunlit studio in a long black coat with gold stitching down the back. Her head was tilted slightly, and her eyes, they weren't bitter. They were free. His hand hovered over the mouse. He clicked again. There was a short video, a behind-the-scenes clip of her fitting a client. No music, just a soft voice explaining the seam work. She said this dress made her feel like herself again. Amira said in the clip, "That's all I want to create, something that brings a woman back to herself." The video ended. Vaughan sat back, slowly. And for the first time since the night he walked out of their home, he missed her. Not what she used to be, who she had become. He didn't say anything to Laria, didn't even tell her he had seen the site. But the next day when her stylist came in and started talking about a new campaign idea, Vaughan stood up in the middle of the conversation and walked out of the room. He got into the elevator, went down to the parking garage, sat in the car and stared at the steering wheel. Why did the woman who said the least leave the deepest silence? Later that week, Amira went viral, not for a scandal, not for a clapback, but for a campaign that featured survivors of abuse wearing pieces from her new collection. The video was simple, no music, just each woman speaking one line before the camera cut to them in a custom piece. He said, "No one would want me after him." She said, "I'd never be seen again. They thought I'd stay broken. I thought I would too, until I wore this, and remembered who I am." At the end, the screen faded to black and her brand name appeared. Sown and known. Vaughan saw it on Twitter, then on Instagram, then on LinkedIn. By nightfall, it was in a group chat with one of his VC partners who typed, "This is powerful. Know her?" He stared at the screen. Did he know her? He used to. He typed a text, "Amira. I saw the campaign. It's you. It's incredible." He hovered, then deleted it. Typed again, "I miss you." Deleted that, too. He placed the phone on the nightstand and turned off the screen. Outside the window, the city lights blinked. But his chest felt dim. At breakfast, Laria was already filming an unboxing. He poured coffee. No words were exchanged. She was holding up a PR box from a skincare brand. "This serum promises to erase years of stress," she said to the camera. "But what do you think? Have I aged in the last 12 months? He looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't see a partner. He saw a performance, and he'd built his life on that stage. That afternoon, he typed her name into Instagram again. Sown and Down, Amira Bellin. Private. He followed her brand page. Paused. Then followed her personal one. No message. Not yet. He needed to sit with this feeling. Because what he was feeling now wasn't just regret. It was the echo of something he used to call home. The first message Vaughan sent was short. "Congratulations on everything. Truly proud of what you've built." He stared at it for 5 full minutes before pressing send. No typing bubble appeared, no response. An hour passed. Then a day. Then 3. The message stayed marked as seen. But Amira said nothing. He told himself she was busy. He told himself maybe she didn't recognize the number. But Vaughn knew better. She knew exactly who he was. She just wasn't giving him space he hadn't earned. And that hurt more than he expected. The second message came a week later. I'd like to talk. Not for drama, just honesty. When you're ready. This time, he added his initials at the end. VL. Still nothing. Amira saw both messages while prepping fabric at her studio. She read them in full. Twice. Then put the phone face down and went back to work. Not because she was angry, but because she was at peace. And peace doesn't answer every knock. She didn't need closure. She had it the day she realized the man she loved never knew how to love her through success. Only without it. The moment Vaughn started worrying about optics was the moment their marriage ended. She just hadn't caught up to the loss yet. Now, she had caught up. That Friday, Vaughn sent flowers. They arrived at her studio, white orchids in a black ceramic vase. No note, just his name printed on the delivery receipt. Amira looked at them once, then passed them off to a woman from her mentorship program who'd just moved into her own apartment. You deserve beauty, she said, handing her the vase. The girl smiled, touched. Amira smiled too, not in pettiness, but freedom. Meanwhile, Vaughn was unraveling slowly. His brand was still intact, his company still profitable, his calendar still full, but none of it filled him. At night, he scrolled Amira's tagged posts, not in a stalking way, but with the ache of someone trying to remember what real used to feel like. There was a picture of her laughing with a client in the sun, another one of her holding fabric samples near a window, eyes soft but sharp, no makeup, no filters, still stunning, still whole. He opened their old wedding album for the first time in years. They had taken pictures in a garden near Piedmont Park. He'd forgotten how bright she looked that day. Not glamorous, but vibrant, present. She used to say, I'm not trying to impress the room. I'm trying to feel like myself in it. He didn't understand it then. He did now. Because Laria didn't walk into rooms to feel like herself. She walked in to be captured. They argued that week. Not about Amira, not directly, but everything came to a boil over brunch. I told you to wait for lighting. Laria snapped when he took a bite before she'd finished recording her sponsored post. I was hungry, he said, barely looking up. You ruin the shot when you touch the plate early. Then maybe don't stage everything like it's a movie set. The words came out sharp. She froze. He didn't apologize. She packed a bag and left that night, saying, I need a break. He didn't stop her. He didn't even ask when she'd be back. The next morning, a tabloid ran the headline, Trouble in Influencer Paradise. Laria seen solo at spa retreat. He didn't read the article. He was already on his laptop watching a panel Amira had spoken on the week before. It was titled, Quiet Power Building Without Noise. She wore a deep green blazer and black slacks. No heels, minimal jewelry, natural curls. One of the panelists asked her, if you could go back and change how things ended with your ex-husband, would you? She paused, tilted her head, then said, I wouldn't change how it ended. I'd only change how long I waited to believe I was enough without him. The audience fell silent, then erupted into applause. Later that evening, Vaughn tried again. I heard the panel. You were incredible, still are. I won't keep reaching out, but if there's ever a window to talk, even just as people who once mattered to each other, I'd be grateful. He hit send, waited. No response that night. But the next morning, Amira replied. One word. Thank you. That was all. No opening. No invitation. No door cracked. Just acknowledgement that she'd heard him, that she'd moved on. Vaughn stared at that message for a long time. Not hurt, not disappointed. Just quiet. It was the first time in a long time he realized some doors don't slam shut. They just close soft and stay closed, because the person inside isn't bitter. They're just healed. Across town, Amira added the final touches to a custom piece for a woman entering her first year of sobriety. She clipped the tag inside the neckline, pressed the seam flat, then folded the dress neatly into a white linen box with a handwritten note. "You are not what they said. You are what you survived." Ab, her assistant, knocked on the door. "That Congresswoman's stylist called. Wants to pull 3 pieces for her upcoming trip." Amira smiled. "Let's send 4. She didn't mention the texts, didn't mention the flowers, didn't need to, because her focus wasn't behind her anymore. It was forward. Thread by thread, step by step. She had become what no one expected. Not loud, not vengeful, not brand new. Just herself again. Have you ever had someone walk out like you were easy to forget, only for them to realize you were the one thing they couldn't replace? If you felt that in your chest, don't just watch silently. Tap the like button. Drop a comment if you've ever chosen peace over closure. And subscribe if you're here for stories that remind you your growth doesn't need their apology. The first time a congresswoman mentioned Amira Belen's name on national television, Vaughan was in a board meeting. It was background noise, a segment playing on the wall-mounted screen as they waited for the next presenter to load their slides. "And this coat I'm wearing is from a black-owned label called Sewn and Known, founded by designer Amira Belen. I wear it because it makes me feel like I walked through fire and came out standing taller." The room turned toward the screen. Vaughan froze. One of the investors flipping through his notes said, "Sewn and Known. That name's been floating around a lot lately." Another added, "Yeah, I saw her pieces at an exhibit last month. Quiet elegance. Feels like legacy." Vaughan didn't speak, didn't blink. He just stared at the screen as the congresswoman smiled, patted the coat proudly, and moved on with her interview. No one in the room connected the dots. No one knew Vaughan once shared a mortgage with that name. That name now moved in spaces his own brand never reached. A week later, Amira was invited to speak at a creative leadership summit in DC. She wasn't booked for the glamour. She was booked for her story. Her journey from being discarded quietly to becoming a voice for women who built from scratch hit a nerve in the industry. No flash, no sponsor hunting, just truth, dressed in silk seams and quiet confidence. Backstage before her session, she looked out from behind the curtain and saw rows of seats filled with politicians, fashion buyers, and non-profit leaders. 3 years ago, she was sketching on her kitchen table in a sweatshirt Vaughan once bought her. Now, she was introducing herself to a world that once thought she'd vanish. Her speech was brief, measured. She spoke about failure, not with shame, but with clarity. "I didn't start this brand because I wanted attention," she said. "I started it because I was rebuilding, and I didn't want my healing to be quiet anymore." She closed with, "Sometimes the people who leave you just create space for you to return to yourself." Standing ovation, no music, just respect. Afterward, a journalist approached her backstage. "I'd love to feature you in The Echo. It's a piece on legacy builders who didn't follow the blueprint." Amira nodded. "Let's talk." No rush, no desperation. She was in demand, but still intentional. Later that week, she went home to Atlanta and found 3 handwritten letters in her mailbox, each from women who had never bought a single dress, but each of them said the same thing in different ways. "You reminded me I'm not invisible. Watching you rise reminded me I'm allowed to start over. You didn't just build a brand. You gave me permission." Amira read them one by one at her kitchen table, then placed them in a small box marked, "Keep going." That night, she received an email. Subject line, "Invite, Paris Women in Power Global Panel." They wanted her as a speaker. All expenses covered. She closed her laptop slowly and leaned back in her chair. Not because she was shocked, but because something inside her finally settled. She called her assistant the next morning. "I'm going to need someone to help with international coordination," she said. "Let's post the role today." And just like that, Sewn and Known had its first global step. Across the city, Vaughan sat at a rooftop bar with an old college friend visiting from Texas. The friend scrolled his phone, paused, and turned the screen toward Vaughn. "Isn't this your ex?" Vaughn looked down. Amira. Front page of a digital cover story. Hair up. Minimal makeup. A grey structured coat from her line draped over her shoulders. Headline: "The woman who turned silence into power." He nodded once. "Yeah." The friend laughed softly. "You must be sick." Vaughn didn't respond, not because he disagreed, but because sick didn't even touch what he felt. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even regret anymore. It was something deeper, something quieter. Loss, not of a relationship, but of access. He watched the way people talked about her now. Not as a reaction, not as a +1, but as a presence. She wasn't someone's wife anymore. She was a voice. And Vaughn, for all his money, couldn't buy his way back into that space. She had become untouchable, not because of revenge, but because of self-worth. At her studio, Amira paused during a team meeting. Her intern had just suggested a new phrase for their brand packaging. It read, "For the version of you that they never saw coming." Amira looked at the words, smiled, approved it. That version. She had become her. And she didn't owe anyone an explanation for how she got there. Vaughn sat alone in his penthouse, half a drink untouched on the counter. The silence was heavier than usual. He had muted the group chats, stopped posting updates. He'd even postponed a podcast interview that his PR team begged him to do. He wasn't depressed, but he wasn't present either. Everything around him felt like a project that no longer had a purpose. His assistant had confirmed the news that morning. Amira's brand had officially closed a funding round with an angel investor group focused on female founders. That was her third in less than a year. She didn't need his endorsement, didn't need his name, didn't need him. And that realization, while slow, was steady. He opened his email, typed a new message, then closed it. He had nothing left to say that didn't sound small. Meanwhile, Amira was invited to speak at a high school career day in her old neighborhood. She didn't need the appearance. She didn't bring a camera crew. She went because when she was 17, no one like her had come back to that school. She wore dark jeans, a soft tan blazer, and flat boots. No designer labels, no announcements. But the moment she stepped into the gym, heads turned. Some students already knew who she was. Others didn't. But they all listened. She didn't talk about betrayal. She talked about purpose. "Sometimes you get discarded," she said to the room of teens. "Not because you're worthless, but because someone else doesn't know how to carry something valuable." One girl in the front row wiped her cheek with her sleeve. Amira saw it. She kept going. "I didn't get stronger to prove anything. I got stronger because sitting in pain wasn't the plan for my life." She left the stage to quiet applause. She wasn't there for claps. She was there for seed planting. Later that day, a student slipped her a folded note. It read, "My mom got left too. She thinks she failed. I'm going to show her your story." Amira pressed the paper to her chest and closed her eyes for a moment. This, not fashion, not fame, was the real legacy. That night, she walked through her studio with the lights off. Not because she was tired, but because she liked seeing it still, complete, unbothered. Every mannequin held a story. Every folded box in the corner was a reminder that healing wasn't loud, but it left traces. She picked up her phone to a missed call. Vaughn. No voicemail, no text. She didn't return it. She didn't block him, but she didn't give him space either, because he wasn't reaching out from love. He was reaching out from memory, and that wasn't enough anymore. Across the city, Vaughn sat in his car outside her studio. He didn't get out, didn't knock. He just looked at the sign painted in matte gold letters above the entrance. Sown and known. It used to mean nothing to him. Now it meant everything he couldn't buy back, not because he wanted to claim it, but because he realized he never helped her build it. He remembered how she used to sketch beside him on the couch, cross-legged, her pencil tapping rhythmically against her notebook. He used to tell her, "You can go big with this one day." But when his time came, he never made space for hers. And by the time she bloomed, he was already holding hands with someone who cared more about her camera angle than his actual face. That night, Laria returned to the condo. She dropped her designer weekender bag on the couch. "Your energy's been off. I can feel it," she said, peeling off her sunglasses. He nodded. She waited for more. Got nothing. After a long pause, she said, "If you're bored, just say that." Still no reply. She threw up her hands. "I don't do guilt-tripping. Either talk or don't. But I'm not sitting around waiting to be mourned while I'm still breathing." She walked into the bedroom. The silence returned. Not cold, not tense, just indifferent. That was worse. The next morning, Vaughan sat at his desk and stared at the wall for a long time. His phone buzzed. A calendar alert. Investor Q&A, 12 p.m. He ignored it. Instead, he clicked open a bookmarked page, Amira's latest interview with a women's leadership magazine. In it, she was asked, "If you could say anything to the version of you right after the divorce, what would you tell her?" Her answer, "Don't waste your tears. Save your energy. The woman you become will thank you for not collapsing." He exhaled, a sound he didn't know he needed to hear. That night, he wrote a message he never planned to send. "You were the safest place I ever had. I didn't know how to honor that. You deserved someone who could see the whole of you and not be intimidated. I see it now, and I carry that loss with me, not because I want it back, but because it taught me what I destroyed." He stared at the words, then closed the app. Not every truth needs to be spoken. Some truths are just consequences. Amira, at that exact hour, was laughing over Thai takeout with her assistant and junior designer. Her team was small. Her circle was tighter. Her heart was full. They were planning her upcoming pop-up event in Chicago, and when someone suggested a printed quote for the thank you cards, Amira offered one of her own. She didn't glow up. She healed. That's what made the difference. Everyone nodded, because they knew that's exactly who she was now. Not a comeback story, not a revenge arc, but a woman who stitched herself whole. It started with one girl, 16, shy, barely made eye contact. She came into the Sown and Known studio on a Tuesday afternoon, part of a school outreach program Amira had quietly sponsored. Her name was Tia. She didn't say much during the tour, but when they got to the design floor, something in her shifted. Her hand brushed against a rack of finished dresses, then lingered on a swatch of burnt orange fabric. "I like this one," she whispered. Amira smiled. "Come sit with me," she said, motioning toward the big cutting table near the back. Tia hesitated, then followed. They didn't talk much, just sat in the stillness. After 10 minutes, Amira slid a blank sketch pad toward her and said, "You don't have to say it. Just draw it." Tia looked at the pencil, then the pad. She drew. An hour later, she had a rough outline of a jumpsuit. Nothing polished, but bold, confident, exactly what she wasn't ready to say out loud yet. That day became a blueprint. What started as one outreach visit turned into weekly mentoring sessions. Then, applications flooded in. Local girls, college dropouts, single moms, women who never saw themselves reflected anywhere but knew they had something inside that hadn't been touched yet. Amira didn't create a non-profit. She created a space where brokenness wasn't pitied, it was redesigned. The program was called Thread and Thought. Each woman walked in with a story. Each one walked out with a garment that told it better. And Amira? She watched them become what they'd never been told they were allowed to be. Visible, capable, powerful. Meanwhile, Sown and Known's online sales crossed a new milestone. A-list stylists were requesting private appointments. But Amira didn't chase celebrities. She served stories. If a woman didn't feel herself in a piece, they reworked it. Not for profit, but for alignment. Her pieces didn't carry trends. They carried testimony. At a live podcast interview, the host leaned forward and asked, "What do you think sets your brand apart in an industry full of noise?" Amira answered without blinking, "Some people sell fabric. I design identity." The audience fell silent, then nodded. Because it wasn't a slogan. It was her truth. Back at home, She finally unpacked the last box from the move she made 3 years ago. She hadn't needed to. Everything already had its place. But this one had stayed sealed, tucked away under her bed like an unopened chapter. Inside were photos. Her wedding, her honeymoon, her old journals. She didn't cry flipping through them. She didn't smile either. She just honored the fact that once she believed in something that ended, and that was okay. She slid one photo of her and Vaughn in front of a cabin in Asheville into the bottom of her closet. Not for memory, for measurement, to remind herself how far she had traveled from that girl. Across town, Vaughn stared out the window of a rideshare, watching the city blur past. He had just finished a panel at a tech conference. He spoke on scaling systems, optimizing user flow, nothing about values, nothing about people. The applause was decent. The post-event mingling dry. Everyone shook hands. No one asked him who he was beyond the pitch deck. His phone buzzed. A new article notification. Sewn and known partners with Women's Correctional Program to teach fashion design to inmates. He tapped it. Read in silence. The photo showed Amira standing between two women in beige uniforms, their faces soft, eyes alert. Behind them, sewing machines, fabric rolls, workstations. The headline could have read, "She's not just healing, she's rebuilding everyone she meets." Vaughn placed the phone on the seat beside him, closed his eyes. For the first time, he didn't miss her as a wife. He missed her clarity, her purpose, her spine. Laria had moved into a condo 2 floors below. They weren't technically separated, but they no longer shared meals, schedules, or conversations. Everything felt like a quiet fade, and Vaughn didn't fight it. He didn't know how to anymore. He had spent years chasing exposure. Now he lived with the consequence of being seen by everyone, except the one person who used to know him. Back in Amira's studio, a young woman asked her during a press interview, "What made you finally believe you could do this?" Amira looked up from her machine, thought for a moment, then answered, "I stopped waiting for permission." The journalist leaned in. "From who?" Amira smiled. "My past." Amira didn't care about awards, not because she was above them, but because recognition had never been her motivation. So, when her assistant ran into the studio holding a white envelope, with a gold seal and breathless excitement, she almost dismissed it. "Open it," the assistant said, eyes wide. "You need to." Inside was a formal invitation, the Whitmore Foundation's Woman of the Year award, not just for fashion, for impact, resilience, influence. The letter listed her work with Thread and Thought, her design mentorships, her restorative justice program, and how Sewn and Known had redefined luxury as something more than expensive. Amira sat with the letter in her lap, not smiling, not shocked, just still. Because this wasn't a moment to celebrate, it was one to breathe through. The award ceremony would be in Chicago, an auditorium of leaders, lawmakers, CEOs, activists. The night wasn't about dresses, it was about stories. And for once, her name was being honored not as someone's wife, not as someone's ex, not as someone attached, but as the name itself, Amira Belen. She didn't bring a +1. She flew in alone, styled herself, no glam team, no borrowed diamonds, just a tailored navy pantsuit she made herself, a gold cuff from her grandmother, his jewelry box, and a quiet confidence that didn't need red carpet approval. She sat in the second row, waited quietly. When they called her name, the room stood, not for trend, but for truth. She walked to the stage, nodded once, and spoke without looking at notes. "I don't want to take up space tonight pretending like this journey was graceful the whole time," she said. "There were nights I cried through seams and questioned if quiet women ever get remembered." A pause. "I still don't know the answer. But I know now. I don't need to be remembered by everyone. I just need to be used by what almost broke me." Standing ovation. Someone in the crowd recorded the moment. It hit 2 million views in 48 hours. The caption, "This is what becoming whole sounds like." Vaughn saw the video late at night. He didn't search for it. It came to him, forwarded by a former colleague with the message, "I didn't know she was this." He watched it twice, then again with the sound off. Just her expression, her voice, her composure, the way her eyes didn't tremble, the way her shoulders stood still. She looked untouchable, and not in a way that made her unreachable, in a way that made her finally free. Later that week, he spoke at a startup accelerator mixer. Small room, investors, founders, a few tech journalists. One of them introduced him as the Lattimore behind one of the biggest tech partnerships in Georgia history. He smiled, shook hands, talked numbers. But as the event ended, a young woman approached him. "Excuse me," she said, "you're Vaughn Lattimore?" "Yes." She extended her hand. "I'm a mentee in the Thread and Thought program. Amira Belen changed my life." He paused. Her words hung between them. She smiled, walked away, and Vaughn felt like a man who'd shown up at the wrong gate and only just realized the flight had taken off years ago. Across town, Amira walked into her studio, holding a small bouquet from a florist who always got her order right. No card, just white roses and one sprig of lavender. They weren't from Vaughn. They were from her intern, Tia. The note inside read, "You taught me how to become the girl I didn't know how to believe in. Thank you for teaching me how to begin." Amira wiped the corner of her eye, then opened the door to her design floor and got back to work. She was in the middle of finishing a piece for a mother of 3 starting a new job when her assistant brought over a press request. A major business publication wanted to name her one of the 50 most influential women in the country. Amira read the email, then asked, "Can they feature the whole team instead?" Her assistant blinked. "You want to share the spotlight? I want to widen it." That same week, Vaughn received a call from a legacy media outlet. They wanted to do a follow-up on his 5-year journey post-exit from his original app. He said yes. During the interview, the reporter asked, "You've built something strong. Any regrets?" He hesitated, then said, "Only one." The reporter raised an eyebrow. Vaughn didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. The silence said it all. Later, as he walked out of the building, he passed a magazine stand. There on the cover, Amira. No dramatic headlines, just her standing near a window with the words, "Power isn't loud. Sometimes it's sown." He picked up the copy, opened it, read the first page, then left it on the seat of the subway before he got off. Because some stories you read once and remember forever. Back in her studio, Amira finished packing for a trip to Senegal, a project she'd dreamed of for years. Her brand was expanding to teach young girls across the diaspora how to sew their names into something lasting. It wasn't about fashion anymore. It was about restoration. She zipped the suitcase, looked around, and whispered to herself, "I am what no one planned for, and everything they couldn't stop." The sun in Dakar hit different, not harsh, just honest. It didn't hide behind buildings or filters. It met you directly, warmed your skin, and stayed with you long after the day was done. Amira stood on the rooftop of a community center overlooking the city, wind brushing her curls, clipboard in hand. Below, 30 girls sat in a circle of benches, laughing, measuring, learning. Each of them held a piece of fabric and a pencil. None of them had sewn a single stitch before this program. And yet, the pride they carried, in posture, in eye contact, in curiosity, was unmissable. Amira didn't just bring fabric. She brought mirror moments. Moments where these girls could finally see themselves as more than help, more than shadows, more than expectation. She saw them, and they saw themselves through her. The project was called Thread Without Borders. It was an extension of Thread and Thought, designed to cross oceans with one belief. If you can create something with your hands, no one can take away your sense of value. She didn't bring media with her. She brought seamstresses, mentors, sketchbooks. One girl, 14, created a wrap dress with no pattern, just instinct. When Amira complimented her, the girl whispered, "I didn't know I could make something." Back in Atlanta, Vaughn walked into his kitchen to silence. The kind that doesn't echo, just lingers. The kind you don't hear until the last headline fades and the last bottle of champagne flattens in the fridge. Laria had officially moved out 2 weeks ago. They didn't fight. They barely spoke. She simply said, "This isn't a partnership, it's a production," and walked out with a single suitcase. She left behind every designer bag and branded fragrance. He never asked why. He already knew. She wasn't leaving him. She was leaving the image of who he tried to be. His days felt manageable. His nights empty. There was always another pitch, another fund, another invitation. But none of them felt real, because when the cameras shut off, no one called to ask how he was really doing. No one checked his silence. Not like Amira used to. She used to notice his pauses. Now he lived in them. One afternoon, he scrolled through Amira's brand page again, not for pain, not for longing, but for grounding. She had posted a photo from Dakar, standing barefoot in a modest studio beside young girls in headscarves and matching linen smocks. The caption read, "This is what legacy looks like when you stop chasing applause and start planting people." Thousands of comments, photos reposted by global brands, celebrities tagging her as a source of inspiration. Vaughan looked away from the screen and stared at his own reflection in the window. He had chased influence. She had built impact. And no matter how many digits showed up in his accounts, that difference was loud. Amira returned from Senegal, quieter than when she left. Not tired, just full. She had left pieces of herself in the seams those girls stitched, and in return, they had sewn something into her too. She didn't come back to be celebrated. She came back to keep building. Her team greeted her with tears and hugs. There were new orders, new collaborations, and a potential documentary pitch. She nodded at it all, then asked for 24 hours before any meetings. She wanted one day to sit in her grandmother's rocking chair on the porch of her childhood home, sipping ginger tea with mint and honey. No sound, no camera, just air and memory. That night, she lit a candle in the room where she used to stitch her first samples, and whispered, "I kept the promise." Meanwhile, Vaughan sat through a branding meeting where a junior exec pitched him an idea about rebranding his company toward more conscious capitalism. The buzzwords were loud. The heart was missing. He nodded politely, but inside, something deflated. He wasn't interested in language that sounded good anymore. He wanted alignment. He just didn't know where to find it, because the one person who lived that truth, he'd traded her for followers. He didn't try to reach out again. He knew it would be noise, and Amira didn't respond to noise anymore. She responded to stillness, to soul, to things he couldn't buy his way into. Not with charm, not with money, not with polished regret. Later that week he walked past a mural downtown. It had been painted overnight. Huge, beautiful, powerful. It was Amira. Not her face, but her outline, holding thread and fabric above a circle of women, with these words: "What she built couldn't be stolen, sold, or silenced." There was no signature, no hashtag, but everyone knew who it was. He stood in front of it for several minutes. Tourists took pictures. Locals nodded with pride. And Vaughan. He walked away without saying a word, because the mural didn't need explanation, and his silence, for once, it wasn't guilt. It was respect. The email arrived at 8:02 a.m. Amira read it twice before standing up from her desk and walking to the window. It wasn't a request for a dress. It wasn't an event invite. It was from the National Policy Forum for Women and Equity. They wanted her to join a panel discussion televised across the country, not about fashion, but about rebuilding identity after betrayal, displacement, and economic abandonment. It wasn't just a seat at the table. It was a seat above it. A chance to speak to millions of women who had lost something: relationships, careers, confidence, and were now searching for permission to rise again. She didn't reply immediately. She let the email sit, because for Amira, decisions weren't about spotlight, they were about fit. Later that evening, she sat in her studio with her lead seamstress, going over a new silhouette. "You ever think we'd be here?" the seamstress asked. Amira smiled, pinning a shoulder seam. I didn't even know where here was supposed to be. The seamstress paused. You think he ever imagined this for you? Amira didn't look up. She answered softly, I don't think he imagined me at all. Just his version of me. Silence hung. Then Amira said, but I'm done being someone's version. She replied to the invitation that night with one line. I accept, but I come as I am. No scripts, no softened edges. The panel aired 2 weeks later. Amira sat center stage. No designer behind her. No stylist on standby. Just her. Black turtleneck. Wide leg pants. Bare face. Clear voice. The moderator asked, what's the hardest part of starting over after being left? Amira exhaled before answering. Admitting that you were never seen in the first place. Gasps in the crowd. A silence on set. She continued, I wasn't healing from heartbreak. I was healing from invisibility. The heartbreak just exposed it. Across the country, women tweeted her words, clipped the video, texted their friends. She said it. She said my story. That night, Amira's inbox flooded. Hundreds of letters, DMs, voicemails from women, some 22, others 62, thanking her not for hope, but for truth. Vaughan watched the replay at 2 a.m. He had missed the live airing. His assistant had mentioned it in passing. She's on that equity panel. You used to be married to her, right? He said nothing, but when the house was dark and still, he opened the link and sat in his home office. Elbows on knees, watching the woman he used to call too quiet speak to a nation. She was poised, unshaken, but not cold. He could still hear her warmth. But it wasn't for him anymore. She spoke of women building from ash, of not waiting to be rescued, of redefining value as something internal. It wasn't flashy. It was foundational. And Vaughan sat there knowing she didn't just leave the chapter they shared. She had rewritten the book. The next morning, his board offered him a new opportunity, a chance to expand the company into a new international market, which meant stepping back from operations. He said yes, not because it was strategic, because it was time. He had built something successful, but not something meaningful, not the way Amira had. And while he didn't plan to start over in the way she did, he did plan to step back, to reassess the kind of man he had been so busy avoiding. Meanwhile, Amira was in Harlem for a small roundtable event with community organizers and local women's leaders. It wasn't press-covered, no glam, just conversation and tea and shared weariness. A woman in the circle said, "You didn't give us answers, you gave us language." Amira blinked. That sentence hit harder than the applause from any stage. She had never wanted fame. She wanted function. For every piece of fabric to give someone their voice back. For every quote to feel like a mirror. For every step forward to leave something behind that mattered. At the end of the night, one of the women from the group, an older grandmother in a floral scarf, grabbed her hand and said, "I lost my dignity a long time ago, but I feel like you gave me a needle to stitch it back." Amira hugged her, held her tight, and whispered, "Then you keep sewing. Don't you stop." Across town, Vaughan cleaned out the second closet in his home, not to prepare for anyone else, but to make space. He found a shirt Amira once bought him tucked in the back, still folded, still pressed. He didn't hold it to his face, didn't smell it. He folded it again and placed it in the donation box, not to forget her, but to free both of them, because the version of her he clung to, she didn't exist anymore. The woman she became, he'd never be close enough to touch. That night, Amira sat in her new apartment, one with a rooftop garden, minimalist, furniture, and a wall of Polaroids from every place she'd visited since the divorce. Senegal, Chicago, New Orleans, Harlem, Oakland, and counting. She ran her hand over the Polaroids slowly. Each face reminded her the pain didn't win. The silence didn't erase her. And the love she had once poured into someone who didn't see her, it wasn't wasted. It had simply been planted. And now, she was living in the harvest, The first time Amira noticed him, he wasn't trying to be seen. He was fixing the front door to her studio. The hinge had come loose after a delivery mishap. She had filed a maintenance request and was told someone would come by. She expected a rushed contractor with headphones and no conversation. Instead, he walked in quietly, removed his shoes at the mat, and greeted her with a calm, "Ma'am." She looked up from the measuring table. He was tall, maybe late 30s, hands rough, edges soft, no name tag, no clipboard, just a simple toolbox and the kind of presence that didn't compete with the room. She nodded. "Back hinge." He smiled once. "I saw. Looks like someone pulled too hard on a stuck door." She stepped aside and let him work. No noise. No small talk. Just purpose. After 15 minutes, he stood up and dusted his hands. "All set," he said. "Reinforce the bottom plate too. Shouldn't come loose again." Amira offered a polite thank you and handed him a bottle of water. He took it, then paused before asking, "These yours?" nodding to the fabric racks. "Yes," she replied. "You designed them?" She nodded. He looked at the line of coats. "Feels like something built to last," he said. "Like it belongs to more than one lifetime." Before she could respond, he tipped his head and walked out. She didn't ask for his name, didn't think about him after, until he showed up 2 weeks later. One of the thread and thought girls had accidentally broken a chair leg while moving mannequins. Amira called in the building's repair line again, and it was him. Same quiet, same presence. This time, he smiled when he saw her. "You again," she chuckled softly. "You again." His name was Ellis. He owned a small repairs and interiors business, did most of his work in private homes, but kept a few commercial clients around the city. His father had been a carpenter. His mother taught music at a public school. He said those two things, rhythm and building, raised him right. They talked more this time. Nothing deep, but not shallow either. She asked about his favorite thing to build. "Kitchen tables," he said. "They hold more stories than people realize." He asked her what she hated designing. "Pockets," she said. "Most brands fake them." "I don't." They both smiled at that. After he finished, he lingered. Not awkwardly, just unhurried. "Do you ever show your work outside Atlanta?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said. "Depends on the space." "I'm not built for spectacle." He nodded. "Neither am I." Then, before walking out, he added, "You carry calm well." She blinked. Not because it was flirty, but because it wasn't. It was honest. And she hadn't been called calm in a long time. Only strong, resilient, reclaimed. But calm? That was new. He showed up a third time a month later, not for work. He brought her a small wooden box, sanded smooth, edges rounded. Inside was a seam ripper carved into the handle, her initials etched along the side in tiny burning letters. She stared at it for a long time. "Why this?" she asked. Ellis shrugged. "Because sometimes the tool that removes what doesn't fit is the one that saves the fabric." She swallowed. He didn't say anything more. He didn't ask for her number. He didn't linger. He simply left. She used that seam ripper every day after, and every time she thought of the way he spoke, soft but sure, like someone who didn't have to raise his voice to be heard. Meanwhile, Vaughan was preparing for his trip to Singapore. The expansion deal had gone through, and his transition out of daily operations was in motion. He didn't feel sad. He didn't feel relieved. He just felt blank, like a man folding his suits into a bag he didn't pack for himself. The life he'd designed had been full of choices, but none of them felt like freedom. In the airport lounge, his phone buzzed. It was an Instagram reel from one of his colleagues' wives. Caption: "This is what Grace looks like." He tapped the video. Amira. Again, but this time, she wasn't on stage. She was standing at a community center door, laughing with a group of young girls, one of whom ran up and hugged her waist tightly. She bent down, hugged her back, whispered something into the child's ear. The moment was short, but it landed like a full breath in Vaughan's chest. He turned off the video, closed his phone, and for the first time in a long time, whispered to no one. "You were always more than I knew how to hold." Back in Atlanta, Amira sat across from Ellis at a small coffee shop near Piedmont Park. It wasn't a date, but it wasn't not one either. He had brought her a piece of wood with 3 empty grooves carved into it. "I want to build a bench," he said, "with inlaid stones, each one from a place that made you feel like you grew." She blinked, surprised. "For me?" He nodded once. "Not as a gift, as a story. You choose the stones, I'll carve the seat." Amira didn't answer right away, but she smiled, because there was something healing about being offered something that didn't want to change her, just carry her. The next time Ellis came by, he didn't knock. He sent a message, made something for the bench, left it at the door. Amira stepped out and found a small velvet pouch. Inside were 3 stones, one from Senegal, one from Charleston, and one from a quiet beach near Savannah. On a note card, in neat block handwriting, he wrote, "You said you grew in all 3. I listened. No name, no phone number, no question, just observation and offering." She held the stones in her palm for a long time before placing them on the fabric table beside her measuring tools. Ellis didn't text every day, didn't crowd her schedule, but when he showed up right, helping a student screw in a light fixture, fixing a wobble in her main office chair, leaving behind simple things, a wooden coat hook in the shape of a needle, a new shelf with custom labels for her thread colors, a water bowl for the neighborhood cat that kept sneaking in, and slowly, without effort or announcement, he became part of her rhythm. One Friday, he brought over Thai food and didn't ask to stay. She asked him to anyway. They ate on the studio floor, shoes off, music low. He didn't ask about her past. She didn't ask about his losses. They talked about food, about dreams, about what it means to have peace without needing permission. At one point, he looked at her and said, "I like that you don't fill silence." She smiled. "I had to get comfortable in it." He nodded. "I can tell." Then he said nothing more, and neither did she. Across the city, Vaughan was packing again. Singapore was calling, not with urgency, but obligation. He had signed on for a year-long transition role, and though the contract was flexible, it was the cleanest exit path he had. His home was mostly empty now. Laria had officially transferred the deed to her own condo. His things fit into 5 boxes and 2 suitcases. There was nothing anchoring him here, except the ghost of who he used to be. He stood in the kitchen one last time, holding a cup of black coffee, and stared at the city skyline. It was once all he wanted, the view, the title, the buzz of being somebody. Now it felt like scaffolding with no structure. As he turned to leave, he paused by the dining table. There, buried in a folder of old paperwork, was an unused card, cream-colored, blank. He had bought it 2 years ago, meant to write Amira a letter, never did. He placed it inside a drawer and closed it. No point now. She had already closed her chapter. That weekend, Amira and Ellis attended a local art show together. Nothing fancy, just local sculptors and fabric artists showcasing their work. He didn't walk in front of her. He didn't pull her to the side when people recognized her. He simply stood beside her, present, unshaken. When one vendor asked, "Are you too?" and let the question hang, Ellis simply looked at Amira. Let her answer. She didn't speak. She reached for his hand, and he took it. Later that evening, they sat in her studio, shoes off again. He watched her sketch something new, a long wool coat with open sleeves and an asymmetrical hem. "Never seen you design like that," he said softly. "It's for a woman who's not trying to look perfect," she said. "She just wants to feel solid." He looked at the drawing. "That's what you've become." She raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Solid, without the noise." Still, he didn't try to kiss her that night. He didn't try to own the moment. He helped her fold fabric, then said, "I'll be back in a few days. The bench is almost done." She watched him walk out the door. and felt something rare. Not electricity, not heat, but safety. Meanwhile, Vaughan landed in Singapore to headlines about Amira's upcoming collaboration with a global mental health nonprofit. She wasn't selling clothes. She was co-designing recovery robes for women in trauma shelters, custom-stitched with words of affirmation on the inner lining. You are still whole. You were never broken. You get to begin again. He read every word, then placed his phone face down on the hotel table. He had nothing to compete with that. And he wasn't going to try. Amira spent the next week prepping for a silent fashion exhibit, one with no music, no captions, no runway, just still mannequins, soft lighting, and mirrors behind every piece so the viewer had to see themselves as they looked. The idea was hers. People keep waiting to be told what they see, she said. I want them to decide for themselves. The night before opening, Ellis came by with the finished bench. It was made of ash wood, sanded smooth with inlaid stones, each one tied to a moment she'd shared with him about where she'd grown. Senegal, Charleston, Atlanta, Harlem. No engraving, no initials, just a single line along the underside. She rebuilt, and never apologized for it. She ran her hand over it, then sat down. It fit. No noise, no press, just presence. As he turned to leave, she reached out and touched his hand. Ellis? He looked back. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. He walked back to her, leaned forward, and kissed her, softly, slowly, respectfully. And when he pulled back, he whispered, You don't owe anyone an explanation, especially not for letting yourself be seen. Have you ever met someone who didn't try to fix you? They just made space for you to feel safe again? If this chapter stirred something in you, a memory, a longing, or a truth, don't scroll in silence. Hit the like button. Drop a comment if you've ever learned to love again without losing yourself. And if you're growing into a version of yourself no one saw coming, subscribe. Because Mr. Charles Stories is where healing meets real storytelling. The gallery was silent. No music. No hosts in tuxedos or women clinking glasses. Just stillness. The walls were soft cream. The lighting was warm. Every piece in the room stood on a platform of reclaimed wood, and behind each mannequin was a full-length mirror. There were no placards, no brand signs, no price tags, just the garments, structured, raw, flowing, and their reflections. This was the mirror room. Amira had designed it with one purpose, to remove performance. Let people stand in front of a piece, look at themselves and ask, who am I in this story? It wasn't for the press. It wasn't even for buyers. It was for anyone who had ever been told they weren't enough and needed to see themselves through their own eyes again. The first guest was a woman in her 60s. She stood in front of a grey overcoat with uneven lapels and a hand-sewn lining that peeked out subtly at the sleeves. She didn't say a word. She looked at the coat, then at herself. Then at the coat again. After 2 minutes, she pulled out her phone. Not to take a picture, but to delete one. Amira watched from a distance. Said nothing. Because this was never about commentary. It was about reclamation. Over the next hour, the room filled slowly. Not with noise, but presence. Some cried. Some touched the fabric and walked away. Some sat on the bench Ellis made and just stared. Ellis stood in the back, quiet. He wore dark denim and a button-up shirt he didn't bother to tuck in. He wasn't there for show. He was there to support the woman who had stopped hiding from her own reflection, and had given others permission to do the same. At one point, a young man approached the final piece in the collection, a deep navy trench coat with mismatched buttons. He stood frozen for 10 full minutes. When he finally stepped away, he walked over to Amira and said, I didn't know clothes could talk back. She replied, Some don't. But the ones built from pain always say something. Halfway across the world in Singapore, Vaughan watched a news clip of the gallery on a muted TV in his hotel lobby. He hadn't searched for it. It found him. The anchor said, Sown and Known opens their latest concept exhibit in Atlanta, this time without the noise. No logos, no models, just emotion. The mirror room is an experience, not a display. He sipped his coffee slowly. Didn't blink. Didn't change the channel. Later that day, during a business dinner, a potential partner asked him, "Have you ever built something that made people cry?" Vaughan laughed at first, then stopped and answered honestly, "No, not the kind that heals, anyway." The man nodded, unaware of the weight behind the answer. Back in Atlanta, the gallery doors closed for the evening. Amira remained behind. She walked through each section slowly. Her fingertips grazed the seams. The mirrors reflected her back softly, not distorted, not polished, just her. Present, earned. She sat on the bench at the center of the room, exhaled deeply and whispered, "It was never about being seen. It was about seeing myself." Ellis walked up beside her, didn't speak. He simply sat down and placed one of the stones from her bench in her palm, the one from Charleston. She looked at him, held it tight, and rested her head on his shoulder. That night, she posted a photo from the exhibit, just the corner of the room. No people, no faces. Caption, "When the applause fades, let the truth be what stands." Comments flooded in, some from clients, some from strangers, some from women who had never worn her clothes but had learned how to carry themselves differently because of what she created. The mirror room wasn't just a space. It was a statement that you didn't have to be loud to be lasting, and that healing, when stitched right, makes the loudest mark of all. 3 days after the gallery opened, the whispers started, not just from the fashion world, but from places Amira never tried to reach. Therapists, educators, trauma counselors, church groups. A viral video featured a woman breaking down in front of the navy trench coat. No caption, no music, just her reflection and her tears. The video hit over 5 million views in less than 48 hours. Amira didn't share it. She didn't repost it. She didn't capitalize on it. She let the moment be what it was. Unclaimed, unbranded, pure. Ellis stayed in the background. He helped rearrange the lights, adjust seating, refill water bottles in the side room. He didn't push. He didn't hover. He simply anchored the space she had built. When a journalist asked him how it felt being the man beside the moment, he said, "She's the architect. I'm just making sure the lights stay on." Meanwhile, Vaughan returned to Atlanta for a tech summit downtown. He arrived a day early, jet-lagged, disconnected. He walked out of his hotel after dinner, intending to clear his head, and found himself walking east, no destination, no GPS. Then, as he turned a corner on Auburn Avenue, he saw the sign, "The Mirror Room, open until 10 p.m. He stood still, didn't move for a full minute. A couple exited the gallery holding hands. The woman wiped her eyes. The man wrapped his arm around her without a word. Vaughan stepped forward, not because he planned to, but because something in his chest said, "It's time." Inside, the gallery was quiet, dim, warm. A woman near the back stood with her arms crossed in front of a brown wool blazer. A man paced slowly, stopping at each mirror, but never looking directly into them. Vaughan didn't speak to anyone. He walked the perimeter slowly, then paused in front of a sleeveless black tunic, stiff at the collar, open at the back. It was the piece Amira once said was for the woman who didn't want to be noticed but refused to disappear. The mirror behind it showed his reflection, and for the first time, he didn't recognize the man staring back. He sat down on the bench, the one Ellis built, ran his fingers along the edge, then underneath. He found the carved words. She rebuilt and never apologized for it. He exhaled through his nose and nodded once, as if accepting a quiet sentence he'd already served. He didn't ask to see her, didn't leave a note. He stood, walked out, and never looked back, not because he was angry, but because he understood now. Some things don't return. Some doors don't reopen. Not out of spite, but because the person who used to answer them doesn't live there anymore. That night, Amira sat on the floor of her studio folding scarves for a fundraiser event. Her playlist was soft, mostly piano, few lyrics. Ellis came in carrying groceries. He set them down, glanced at her and asked, How many hours have you been in here? Enough, she said with a soft grin. You forget to eat again? I remembered. I just ignored it. He pulled out soup, bread, and tea, set them in front of her, and didn't say a word. She smiled and whispered, You're stubborn. He sat down beside her. And fed you. She leaned against him, letting the silence fill what words never could. Later that night, she received a message from an organizer at the UN Women's Summit. They wanted her to keynote next quarter in New York, not as a designer, as a recovery leader. Amira read the email twice, then let her phone rest on the table. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she whispered to herself, Don't run from what's calling you now. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid to be seen, not for who she used to be, but for who she finally was. The letter from the United Nations came in a navy envelope with gold trim. Inside, the invitation was short. We invite you, Amira Belen, to deliver the keynote at the UN Women's Global Summit in New York City. Your work has ignited healing in spaces rarely acknowledged. We believe your voice is no longer local. It is necessary. The flight was booked for the following month. Private travel, 5-star accommodations, full coverage. But none of that moved Amira. What moved her was what the letter didn't say. It didn't mention fashion. It didn't mention brand. It didn't mention status. It mentioned voice. And hers had been quiet for most of her life. Ellis came in while she was rereading it. He didn't ask what it said. He saw the look in her eyes, that mix of disbelief and quiet resolve. She handed him the card. He read it once, then said, So, you ready? She nodded slowly. I think so. He kissed her forehead and added, It's not about the size of the room. It's about how you walk into it. She smiled. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Over the next few weeks, the studio prepared for her absence. Staff schedules were shifted, orders completed early, mentorships passed temporarily to trusted leads. Everything stayed grounded, because Amira had never built a brand that revolved around her. She built a brand that could breathe without her presence. That, in itself, was legacy. Meanwhile, Vaughan sat in a smaller office in Singapore. Less glass, less height, but more clarity. He had stepped back from headlines, from the scene. He no longer chased camera crews or panel invites. He was finally asking the hard questions. What am I building if I'm not being watched? What am I choosing if no one claps for it? And for the first time, those questions didn't frighten him. They gave him room to start again, not for redemption, but for responsibility. One afternoon, he opened a blank notebook, the kind Amira used to gift him before big launches. He wrote one sentence at the top, build slow, stay grounded, harm no one. It wasn't a business mantra, it was a personal one he wished he had lived by sooner. Back in Atlanta, Amira rehearsed nothing for her keynote. She refused to script her healing. Instead, she brought 3 objects to her hotel room: the first scarf she ever sold, a photo of her grandmother's sewing table, and the seam ripper Ellis had carved for her. She placed them side by side on her nightstand in New York. No lucky charms, just memory and movement. The night before the event, she walked the streets near the venue in a coat she had made for herself. Midnight green, asymmetrical collar, deep pockets. It wasn't part of a line. It wasn't made for approval. It was hers, built by her hands, worn by her spirit. The next morning she stepped into the venue. No red carpet, no flashbulbs, just a quiet corridor, an open auditorium, and the hum of women from over 70 countries seated in rows, ready, alert, open. When the announcer called her name, the room stilled. Amira walked to the center of the stage, took one breath, then spoke. She didn't talk about fashion. She talked about losing herself quietly, about being reduced by someone who said they loved her, about watching her worth get sized down to someone else's ambition. And then, she talked about what she found when the noise stopped. I didn't rise because I was angry. I rose because I was done. Done asking for permission to matter. Done editing my softness into someone else's comfort. Done waiting to be seen. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't clap right away. They sat with it. And that was the power. She had made them feel instead of react. After the event, dozens of women came forward, some crying, some smiling, some simply holding her hand. One whispered, "I came for solutions. You gave me strength." Amira hugged her. "Then take that strength and pass it." That night, Ellis called. She sat on her hotel bed, legs crossed, voice soft. "Tell me how it felt," he asked. She didn't rush. "It felt like breathing in a room where I used to hold my breath." He paused, then replied, "That's how I felt the first time you let me stay." She didn't speak after that. She didn't need to. She just listened to the quiet. And for the first time in her life, the quiet didn't scare her. It held her. The flight back to Atlanta landed just after sunset. No one waited with signs. No media. No fanfare. Amira walked through the airport with her carry on, a long black coat, over jeans, sneakers she'd worn since the first boutique launch. No makeup, just moisturized skin and peace in her chest. A few people recognized her, but instead of rushing her, they smiled. One woman walked by and said gently, "You helped me leave." Amira paused, turned, and nodded. She didn't need the full story. That sentence was enough. By the time she reached her home, the porch lights were already on. Ellis had cooked. It wasn't extravagant. Rice, grilled vegetables, and lemon chicken in a cast-iron skillet. The kind of food you serve when you know someone's soul is tired but full. He didn't ask about the trip. He just pulled out her chair, sat across from her, and passed the salt like it was any other night. Amira took one bite, then exhaled. "Do you know how rare it is," she said, "to come home and still feel like you're home?" Ellis looked up slowly. Most people feel safest after they land, but some, they don't feel safe until they speak. Amira reached for his hand. She didn't say thank you. He already knew. The next morning, she opened her inbox. The subject lines flooded in. "Your speech changed our board. Can we feature your work in our magazine? We'd love to collaborate on women's shelters in Detroit." But one email stood out. It had no subject. It came from Vaughn's private address. Amira hesitated, then clicked. "Amira, I won't take your time. You owe me nothing. This isn't a request. It's a reckoning. I watched your speech. Twice. I didn't see a brand. I saw the woman I couldn't hold. The woman I used to try and explain away because I was too insecure to match her. I once said I needed someone who understood my world. But what I meant was, I needed someone who made me look good in it. You weren't that. You were bigger than the world I had built. So I shrunk you to fit. I regret that. I've started working with organizations that support post-divorce single mothers in Nairobi and Sao Paulo. I mention your name when I speak, not because it helps them, but because it keeps me honest. I'll never show up in your space again, but I had to say, you were always more. 5th, Amira closed the laptop. Didn't cry, didn't shake. She stood and walked outside. Her garden had bloomed while she was gone. Hydrangeas, marigolds, and the stubborn tulips Ellis planted in the wrong month. They had pushed through anyway. Sometimes growth doesn't ask for permission. Later that week, Amira hosted a small dinner at her studio. 10 women from the first mentorship class. All had survived something. None of them talked about what they left. They talked about what they built. One made sustainable handbags now. Another launched a series of panels for women transitioning out of corporate work. One had just opened her first co-working space in Charleston. Amira listened. Quietly. She didn't need to lead. She had become what she never had. A mirror without distortion. A place where women saw who they were without apology. Meanwhile, in Singapore, Vaughn met with a small team of educators. He didn't pitch a brand. He asked questions. How do we teach young boys about emotional honesty before they grow into men who destroy without knowing they are? The director looked surprised. Vaughn added, I don't want credit. I want change. That meeting opened the door to a pilot program. Nothing big, just honest. For once, he was building without performance. Back in Atlanta, Ellis began plans to expand the community workshop. More sewing machines, more safe hours. He brought Amira to the new building site, a converted firehouse with cracked brick and a leaky ceiling. "This?" she teased. "You sure?" He nodded. "It leaks, but it listens." They both laughed. Because they understood now, spaces don't need polish. They need purpose. One night, weeks later, Amira walked into her old master closet. She hadn't been in there since the divorce. The lights flickered on. She stood in the center, looked at the dresses, heels, silks she used to wear for Vaughn's World. They still held her scent, but not her shape. She stepped back out, closed the door and whispered, "I don't need to fit you anymore." She didn't throw them away. She simply walked past them, into her new room, where nothing hung unused, where every garment breathed, where she breathed. As the season turned, the city whispered in subtle ways. Former clients reached out with no agenda. Old headlines faded. New ones emerged, but not with her name in them. And that was good, because Amira no longer chased presence. She owned peace. The building sat between a rundown pharmacy and a locked-up pawn shop. No sign, no logo. Just 2 words spray-painted near the door, for her. Vaughn stepped out of the car in a plain grey button-up and slacks. No tie, no coat, no team. This wasn't for press. It was his 4th visit to one of the centers he quietly funded. But this one was different. This was the only one started by a survivor. He had read the files. The founder's story mirrored the one he never fixed with Amira, but what rattled him most was the mission statement. Handwritten, scanned, no edits. "I was once married to potential. Now I serve purpose." Inside, the walls were soft yellow, no cameras, no whiteboards full of buzzwords. Just a reading corner, shelves with diapers, a hot meal tray steaming quietly, and a calendar of skill-sharing sessions handwritten in permanent marker. He met women in silence. Some nodded. One hugged him. Another simply stared. He didn't flinch. He listened. One woman, Tasia, spoke up during the group circle. She had 3 kids, left her ex when she realized silence was not peace, and begging wasn't love. "I'm not here for sympathy," she said. "I'm here because I got tired of waiting to be chosen." Vaughn's jaw clenched. Not because she accused him, but because it echoed. He used to think choosing Amira was the same as loving her. Now he knew better. When the session ended, the founder approached him. Shard, late 30s, cropped hair, strong eyes. "You built a house here," Vaughn said. She smiled. "You paid for the bricks. I laid them." "Thank you," he said. Shard nodded once. "Make sure this isn't charity. Let it be consequence." She walked away, not rude, just sure. Vaughn exhaled. It was the most honest check he'd received in years. That night, he didn't return to a hotel. He stayed in a local bed and breakfast owned by a retired teacher. No suites, no room service. But the bed smelled like clean cotton. The coffee was black. And for once, Vaughn didn't rehearse anything before falling asleep. Back in Atlanta, Amira sat in her workshop alone. The team had gone home. She stayed late not to catch up, but to listen. She ran her fingers over the fabric for a new capsule collection inspired by healing. Not curves, not power poses. Healing. Garments designed to make women feel safe when they enter rooms filled with eyes they didn't ask for. As she sketched, her assistant walked in. "Sorry to interrupt," she said. "This letter came for you. It's handwritten." Amira looked up. The envelope had no return address, just her name. She opened it slowly. "Amira, you don't know me, but you funded me. You started a grant I never thought I'd get. You didn't know I had just left a man who spent more money cheating than feeding our daughter. But your name was in the confirmation email. And when I read about your work, I stopped hiding. Last month, I led my first workshop for women in my city. I taught them how to rewrite resumes, yes, but also how to rewrite their story. One of them cried in the middle of class. Said she thought no one would hire a woman who left her husband without a job lined up. I told her she was already working on herself, and that counts. Thank you. Not for saving me, but for proving I wasn't crazy. Rayla from Baton Rouge. Amira sat still. She folded the letter, placed it in the drawer of her desk, not with her contracts, with her vows, the personal ones, the ones that mattered more than paper. The next morning, she met Ellis at the firehouse. Construction was underway. Paint buckets, new windows, drywall stacked in the corner. Looks good, she said. It's not even half done, he replied. Exactly, she smiled. Good things should take time. He walked beside her toward the back. There was a small brick archway, once a furnace, now a nook for therapy sessions. Ellis turned to her. I've been thinking, he said, about your old closet. She raised a brow. Ellis shrugged. You left it untouched. I get it. But sometimes we need to walk through the ruins before we close the gate. Amira nodded. You want to go with me? He smiled. Only if you drive. That weekend, they drove back to her old house, the one Vaughn had moved out of when the divorce finalized. It had been sold to a new couple, but the realtor allowed Amira to walk through one last time for closure. She stepped inside. The marble was still cold, the walls freshly painted, but it wasn't her home anymore. She walked to the master suite, paused at the closet door. Ellis stayed back. Amira opened it, took 3 slow steps in, then reached up and touched the last dress she wore on a red carpet next to Vaughn. It shimmered under the light, still beautiful, but no longer hers. She exhaled, then turned to Ellis. Let's go. He opened the car door for her. As they drove off, she didn't look back. The ballroom was full, lights low, tables dressed in silver, big names from tech, philanthropy, fashion, all clapping politely as the MC read her name. Amira Belen, Visionary of the Year. She rose calmly, not smiling, not trembling, just steady. As she walked toward the stage, the crowd stood. People she never met, brands that once ignored her, men who wouldn't take her meetings 2 years ago. Now they cheered like they always knew her. Ellis stayed seated, watching. He knew she hated these things, but she had shown up because the award wasn't for her. It was for the girls in shelters who still whispered, I think I'm too broken to be anything. She stood behind the mic, took a pause, looked out at the sea of suits and stilettos, then spoke. I used to think silence was strength, that if I didn't complain, I was being graceful. But silence isn't strength. It's just space, and if you don't fill that space with truth, someone else will fill it with shame. I didn't build my company for fashion. I built it for women who forgot they could start over. So, this award doesn't belong to me. It belongs to every woman who left anyway, who stayed quiet until she learned how to speak again, who took her first paycheck and didn't have to explain it to anyone. That's who this is for. A quiet tear slid down the cheek of a woman near the back. She clapped first. The rest followed, but Amira didn't wait to bask. She left the stage, walked right past the PR cameras, back to her table. Ellis stood and hugged her, no words. Later that night, they left through the service exit, not because they were hiding, but because they were done performing. 3 days later, Vaughn sat across from his father at a private club in Buckhead. They hadn't spoken in nearly a year. Still building things that break? His father asked, without looking up from his drink. Vaughn stayed quiet. I read about the center in Charlotte, his father added. You read? Of course. You're still a Latimore. Vaughn exhaled. I don't know what that means anymore. His father finally looked at him. Means we don't run. Vaughn shook his head slowly. No, you didn't run. You just left the mess behind and called it discipline. His father's face didn't change, but his grip on the glass did. I don't blame you, Vaughn said. You were built for survival. I was too. But I'm trying to be built for truth now. And that truth cost you your wife? Vaughn looked up. No. My lie did. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Vaughan rose. "I came here to say goodbye," he said. Not out of anger. Just clarity. His father didn't respond. So Vaughan walked away. And this time, he didn't look back either. That weekend, Vaughan emailed Amira. Short, direct, no pressure. "If you're open to it, I'd like to talk. Not for answers, just accountability." She didn't respond right away. 3 days passed. Then she replied, "There's a community garden near 4th and Glenridge. I volunteer Sundays before noon. You're welcome to come." No signature. But it was an open door. Sunday arrived. The sun was mild. A breeze moved through the rows of basil and tomatoes. Vaughan wore jeans for the first time in months. He showed up with gloves. No entourage, no SUV. Amira was already there, kneeling by a raised bed, planting snap peas. She didn't rise when he approached. He crouched beside her, started pulling weeds from the opposite row. Minutes passed. Just quiet labor. Then she spoke. "I used to bring you here in my mind," she said. Vaughan looked at her. She continued, "Whenever I was doing something new or hard, I used to imagine what you'd say." He swallowed hard. "Did it help?" he asked. She looked up, eyes calm. "No." She stood, wiped her hands on her apron, then gestured to a nearby bench. They sat. The air smelled like mint and soil. Vaughan spoke first. "I won't waste this moment pretending I didn't wreck what we had. I wanted the world to clap for us before I made space for us. I used you as a mirror, not a partner. I know I can't fix what I broke, but I'm not here to ask for that. I'm just here to say, you were never the problem." My pride was... Amira listened, then leaned back slightly, hands folded. "I accept your apology," she said, "not because I need it to move on, but because I know you needed to say it." He nodded. "You don't owe me friendship or a second chance," he added. She smiled faintly. "And you don't owe me forever. But you owed me that truth." They sat for a while longer. No reunion, no promises, just peace. The first time Vaughan visited Amira's community center, he came unannounced. He didn't bring flowers, or a press release, or a new check to erase the past. He came with rolled-up sleeves and a quiet look in his eyes that said, "I'm here to see what you built, not to be seen." The lobby buzzed with energy, kids running to tutoring rooms, teens rehearsing speeches in the debate hall, women walking out of workshops clutching folders titled First Apartment Plan. There was no plaque with her name, no corner office for show, just people, working, healing, learning. And at the heart of it, Amira, laughing with a maintenance worker about a busted faucet, greeting a new mother with a hug, scribbling ideas for a vending machine filled with hygiene kits. Vaughan stood still, watching. She hadn't just moved on. She'd moved forward. Amira didn't see him until someone tapped her and pointed. Her gaze landed on him. She didn't flinch. She didn't wave. She walked up slowly, one brow lifted. "You lost?" "No," Vaughan said. "Found the address on the website." She looked him over. "Want a tour?" "Only if you're the guide." "Grab a visitor badge," she said, turning. He followed. But this time, not to lead. They moved through the center. She pointed at a row of therapy rooms. "Sliding scale mental health for survivors," she said. "We pay for the ones who can't pay themselves." Next, the media lab. "We're building portfolios for girls who want out of the influencer trap. Real skills, real pay." The multi-purpose hall used to be a liquor store. Now it's where we do expungement clinics. He nodded. Quiet. She stopped at the back courtyard. Raised garden beds. A chalkboard wall. A swing set that still smelled of fresh wood. Vaughan exhaled. "You used to talk about this," he said. "Before. All of it." "I stopped waiting for someone to say it was possible," she replied. "I just started laying bricks." He looked around, then met her eyes. "You built something real, Amira." She didn't thank him. Didn't need to. Her silence said, "I know." Later, she offered him tea in the staff lounge. They sat on opposite ends of the couch. "No one here knows who you are," she said. "I like that," he replied. "They know me, though, for who I am now, not who I was with you." He nodded slowly. "I've done a lot of unlearning," he said, "especially about what power means." She glanced at him. "What does it mean now?" "Stepping back so someone else can breathe." Amira watched him carefully. "You want credit for changing?" "No, I just want to live without shame." She let that sit for a moment, then said, "You'll have to keep earning that peace, over and over." "I know." She stood. "I have a budget meeting." He rose too. She walked him to the front. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me. Thank the girl who left before you could ruin her too." She opened the door. He left without asking for anything more. Back at his own company, Vaughan started making quieter choices. He declined a speaking gig, gave a bonus to a junior analyst for catching a mistake he missed, invited Ellis to present instead of him at a venture summit, and he stopped correcting people who assumed Amira had left him because of scandal. He let them believe what they wanted, because the truth was deeper and more important than any defense. 3 weeks passed. Then one morning, Amira received a package, no name on the outside. Just a simple white box with a key inside, and a note, not to open a door, to close a chapter. "The townhouse is yours, no strings, no press, no credit, just release. 5th. She stared at it for a long time, then smiled. Not because she needed the gift, but because he finally understood what giving meant. That weekend, she visited her mother. They sipped ginger tea in the kitchen. "He tried to love me in the language of ownership," Amira said, "but I don't speak that language anymore." Her mother smiled. "Maybe he's learning a new one." Amira looked out the window. "I hope so. Do you still love him?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "I think I love who I wanted him to be, and now that he's becoming someone better, I'm not sure I need him to come back." Her mother touched her hand. "That's what healing sounds like." Fall set in. The leaves outside the community center turned amber and gold. Every window carried warmth, not just from heat, but from the people inside building something together. Amira had become a fixture in her neighborhood. She wasn't the millionaire's ex. She was the woman who got zoning approvals passed without bribes, the one who spoke at council meetings and knew the names of every child who walked through her doors. She was no longer trying to prove anything to the world, or to Vaughan. She had become the woman she needed when she was younger, and nothing felt more complete than that. One evening, she stayed late at the center. No meetings, no workshops, just silence. She sat in the library nook, reading a book a teen had recommended, and out of nowhere, the scent of cinnamon bread filled her nose. She walked to the kitchen. One of the volunteers had baked extra loaves. "You want one for home?" the woman asked. Amira paused. "Sure." She left with it tucked under her arm, still warm, and on the walk back to her car, she saw something that made her stop. Vaughan, standing across the street. No suit, no car, just a tote bag and paint on his fingers. She didn't cross, she didn't wave. He saw her, nodded, and walked the other way. It didn't hurt. It didn't confuse. It just was. Weeks passed. One day, the city invited Amira to speak at an event honoring women reshaping urban America. She declined the spotlight, but they insisted. When she arrived at the ceremony, she walked in wearing a cranberry wool suit and low heels, simple, elegant. She was seated next to Ellis, Vaughan's cousin. He leaned over. "He's not coming," Ellis said gently. Amira blinked. "I didn't ask." Ellis smiled. "I know, but he wanted me to say something." Amira turned slightly. Ellis whispered, "He said the loudest thing he can do now is step aside." Her breath caught, not because she needed him there, but because she believed him. For once. After the event, she walked alone to the parking lot. The city's skyline glowed behind her. She didn't rush, didn't fumble for her phone to check messages, didn't scan for Vaughan's silhouette. Her peace no longer depended on being seen or pursued. She got into her car, leaned back, and smiled. It wasn't the applause that moved her. It was the quiet she carried home. 2 months later, she finally visited the townhouse, the one Vaughan signed over with no strings. She hadn't stepped foot inside since the day she left. It was empty now. No furniture, no photos, no reminders of what once was. She walked the floors slowly. Each room echoed not with sorrow, but with survival. She opened the back door. Sunlight spilled in. She walked to the middle of the backyard and stood still. A single magnolia tree had bloomed. She reached into her purse and pulled out the key, then dropped it in the soil, buried it with her hand. Not out of anger, out of choice. The house wasn't a memory now. It was a marker. She turned and walked out, free. That same night, Vaughan was in a modest hall in Chicago's South Side, attending a panel on ethical entrepreneurship. He wasn't speaking. He was listening. No cameras, no suits, just a notebook in his lap. At the end, a young man approached him and asked, "Weren't you the guy on the magazine cover a few years back?" Vaughan smiled. "Used to be," he said. "Now I'm just someone trying to get it right." Back in her apartment, Amira curled up with her tea and the cinnamon bread she'd frozen. The world outside was quiet, but inside her there was a noise, a pulse, a fire, the kind that doesn't burn you, but keeps you warm. She didn't need Vaughan's return, didn't crave revenge, didn't wish to revisit what they were, because what she had now couldn't be taken, replaced or rewritten. She built it with her own hands, and that was the only legacy she needed. Have you ever outgrown the very thing you once begged for? If this story spoke to a piece of you that's rising, reclaiming, or healing, don't leave quietly. Hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories. This isn't just about tales. It's about truth, the kind that lifts you one step closer to the life you deserve. We tell stories that remind you don't need a title, spotlight, or approval to be whole again. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.